part, which is managing institution-wide online course development. I'm Tony Piña, like Piña Colada, and I am the Chief Online Learning Officer at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. That is the town, not my mental state. But there's a lot of jokes about the university being in Normal, and so I will spare them to you as we go through this presentation. So I guess we'll start off with, who is this guy and why is he worth my 45 minutes? Well, again, I'm head of online learning and extended learning at Illinois State University, Illinois' oldest public university, and right in the middle of the state. So if you draw a line from Chicago to St. Louis, we're right in the middle of that line. I am also a father of 6 wonderful children who are all much older and taller than in this particular picture. I am also the lead guitarist of a local classic rock band called the Rusty Pickups. And so besides that, I've been involved in the field of instructional design and technology for quite a few years, and I've been privileged to work with wonderful colleagues on 8 books in the field of online and distance learning and educational technology. You can find these on Amazon. I've also been very fortunate to have served as a consultant in online and distance learning for a number of colleges and universities across the country. So, so I love this field. And so let's talk about online course development. Typically, how online courses and programs got developed prior to COVID. A lot of people thought that this was something that was foisted among faculty by overeager administrators. And in some cases, that's true. But most of the time, the genesis of online education has come from individual faculty who have put their courses online. And then as those courses start getting more numerous, then academic departments start grouping these things into concentrations, minors, certificates, and fully online degrees. And at some point, administrators like me notice this, and it gets on our radar, and we say, oh, we have online programs. Well, now we've got to formulate policies and procedures and processes, and there's accreditation things to worry about, and there's compliance things to worry about. So when we administrators get involved in this stuff happens. So to a certain extent, my remarks in this presentation are going to be to those who lead online programs. But those of you who influence those people who lead online programs would, this is for you as well. And so prior to COVID, this is really what happens. Things were brought in really organically and then evolved there. But what some of the things that COVID did, of course, is it accelerated and sometimes changed institutional missions and cultures regarding online and distance learning. Things that weren't that important before became incredibly important and sometimes key to survival, particularly during that critical 2020, 2021 period when people were having to put things online, go to emergency remote teaching, and things to which many institutions and many faculty were ill-prepared and ill-trained and ill-supported to do. And so doing the best they could. And so as a result of these things happening during COVID, a lot of institutions have now formalized their digital learning initiatives have hired chief online learning officers, most often at the VP or AVP level, to give them decision-making ability and thinking of this strategically. And then many are centralizing their digital learning operations. They're getting uh, online learning departments, or they're putting them within their centers for teaching and learning, or they're putting it in other places. But they're taking functions that would often be done by individual departments or colleges and actually centralizing those. We'll be talking about that in just a few minutes. Um, the focus for this presentation is managing the online development process. So this is different than having faculty create all of their courses in a vacuum. Um, this allows for a certain amount of scaling the development of online courses. Why we want to manage a process, even create a process to do this, is one, to be able to scale the development. At my institution, it was taking our faculty, we were giving them training on quality matters and all kinds of good stuff to help them develop their own courses for themselves to teach. But it was taking an average of uh, of about a year and a half for faculty to create their courses, which, if you're trying to create a fully online degree program, that's very difficult to scale unless you want to wait years before your program is ready to admit students. And so it also, by creating a process, it allows you to better align individual courses and individual course outcomes to program level learning outcomes. So often, when faculty are doing this on their own and creating courses in a vacuum, um, you run the risk of redundancy among courses and also gaps between courses. And so we've had students who have complained, why am I taking this lesson in this course? This is identical to the same things that I learned and did in a previous course. And it's because those two courses were created by two different faculty who weren't really talking to each other, and there was no coordination at the program level. It also, by managing the process, it allows institutions to contain development costs because it allows us to share resources. It eliminates redundancies within the curriculum and also gaps where you think a course is covering something and it's not. And perhaps most important, it creates a more consistent experience for our online learners. Now, we represent a lot of different institutions with different priorities, with different cultures. So one of the things that is so important is that one size does not fit all, which is why I'm not going to say all colleges, universities, departments, etc., have to do things this way, because one size does not fit all. Okay, well then what are we going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to present for you a framework that will allow leaders to make decisions for the institution depending on institutional priorities, cultures, etc. I definitely have some opinions about which of these works best. And after having I developed my very first online course in 1997 and have been doing distance learning since 1994. And so my very first courses I created using hard-coded HTML and Notepad because we had no learning management systems. We had no HTML editors or anything like that. So our situation right now is a lot better than it used to be. But these things that I'm going to be talking about for the remainder of this presentation are decisions that need to be made regarding the development of online courses. And so you can make these decisions early on and avoid some headaches, or you can kick it down kick the can down the road, and eventually we'll have to make these decisions, perhaps under some duress. And so um, I am going to encourage earlier decision making to avoid this. And so I've fragmented this framework into 4 parts: environment, roles and responsibilities, standards and evaluation, and operations. And for the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to go into each of these decision items and talk about the decisions that need to be made in order to do this correctly. So the very first thing is environmental considerations. And I call them environmental considerations because depending on your decision on these items, it will affect everything else um, down the table as far as that goes. So the first decision is whether online course development is going to be internal or external. And if it is internal, that means that you're running the online program from within the institution. Otherwise, you're using an external firm to manage the development. Um, most of these are known as online program management or OPM firms, and they've been controversial. They're used by a lot of institutions, especially institutions that wanted to get started very quickly and to have a company with some capital that can invest in the development of the online program. And so they could, for institutions that didn't have a lot of upfront investment, these OPMs would do the upfront investment, usually for a percentage of the tuition revenue until their initial investment was made up. And these tuition sharing programs have been quite controversial by themselves. And some of my consulting that I've done is because presidents or provosts were being courted by OPMs, and some were, we've been using an OPM and we want to do things on our own. So how you decide to do this, whether you employ an outside firm or do it all internally, influences everything else, because then your director of distance education or whomever, if it's working with an OPM, then it's usually that person primarily manages the contract. And then how much of the university is involved in the development. So that's one of the 2 biggies. The other real biggie is development going to be centralized or decentralized? And by centralized, I mean that the personnel and resources available to develop online courses, such as instructional designers and multimedia people and others, are they centralized and available to the entire institution, or are these resources decentralized, which means that academic departments or academic colleges each have their own distance education department with their own instructional designers who work for the college rather than work for the entire institution. So depending on those situations, that also answers quite a few of the questions that are going to follow. So let's go on. Then we get to roles and responsibilities, and these are related. So the important role to determine is, what is the role of the faculty member in online course development? Is it an autonomous role? Is it a partnership role? Or is it a team-based role? And so in an autonomous role, the faculty member calls all the shots. The faculty member is in charge. It is her course. And so then the resources that are used for that course, for instance, whether to utilize an instructional designer, is completely up to the faculty member. This has been historically the most common model, is each individual faculty member putting his, her, their course online for them to teach and use. Now we're seeing other models, such as templated courses, what we sometimes call master courses, et cetera, that have different models. But under the autonomous model, the faculty member is in charge of everything, which also means that the faculty member needs to be an expert in digital accessibility, the latest regulations regarding online courses, regular and substantive interaction, the ability to know how to properly chunk information on a screen for maximum maximum readability and navigability by online learners, how to utilize graphics and alt text and graphical placement and all of that. Plus, we would expect faculty to be able to know all of the back end tools and settings that are available in the learning management system, whether that's Canvas, D2L, Moodle, Blackboard, or whatever, which is a lot. That is a lot to expect faculty members on top of teaching, research, and service. So at many institutions, they create a partnership model. And the most common partnership model is teaming up a faculty member with an instructional designer. And depending on that role, and we'll get into the dynamics of that role, but basically in a partnership, faculty members are working together or they're working with instructional designers. In a team-based role, the faculty member is serving as the subject matter expert to a larger team, which could include instructional designers, multimedia designers, editors, video and multimedia technicians and other people, maybe even marketing people. Whereas the faculty member's role is more defined and more concentrated than it is in an autonomous role where the faculty member does everything. Now, related to the other role is if instructional designers are used, what is their role? And I know that there are instructional designers on this in this session, and bless you. In an autonomous role, where the faculty is autonomous, instructional designer's role is optional. The faculty member can choose to use or not use the instructional designer, choose to take the instructional designer's advice and consider the expertise and apply, completely autonomous. In a partnership role, the use of an instructional designer is mandatory. That's the way it is at my institution for fully online programs. The faculty member and the instructional designers form a partnership to build this course. In team-based situations, then the instructional designer is also mandatory. But within that partnership, you have to also determine, is this a true partnership, or is the instructional designer being treated and considered by the faculty as a subordinate, as a TA, or worse, as my own personal IT tech, rather than as an expert and partner in the pedagogy of online. Oh, thank you, Kay. You're very kind. You're very kind. So Once we have the roles and responsibilities determined, then we have to look at things like the scope of work. When a course is developed, at what point is it considered complete? So what are the conditions that must be met before the course is complete? Um, and that's important for the next thing that has to do with the compensation. Because if I am giving faculty a stipend for course development or as a subject matter expert for course development, we have to know how the what when the course is considered complete and how is that course going to be reviewed and assessed for both completeness and also whether it meets the standards and other situations and other requirements of the institution. Now, some will do a quality matters review, some will do an internal review, some will just have the department chair sign off on the course. But you have to determine how that's going to happen because otherwise you don't know when to pay the faculty member. Then compensation. Is this part of the faculty member's normal expected job duties, or does the faculty member receive release time to develop the course, or does a faculty member receive a stipend, or is this a combination of that? And each of these has their advantages and disadvantages. At my institutions, we pay faculty a stipend to serve as subject matter experts. Because the problem for me, as the one who oversees the development, if it's part of the faculty member's normal job duties, and the faculty member does not fulfill that particular project, then I have very little recourse. So when department chairs said, well, can I just give this as part of the faculty's the faculty's regular teaching role? I said, well, yes, but then are you going to give me the ability to dock faculty pay if they don't do the course? Well, no, we can't do that. And I said, well, see, that's the problem. And I don't want that power and ability. It's much easier for me to be able to say, oh, the course isn't done, or oh, it doesn't meet the standards that you agreed to meet, then I don't have to pay you until it's done. And so, but then there's release time, and some people will say, well, how about if I give them release time to do this? And I say, great, that's wonderful. But that's over and above the agreement that they have with me. So if you want to give them release time, oh, bless you. That's a wonderful thing to do. But don't do that in place of here. And so what I have found works best are the stipends, but the stipends also have to have a contract specifying exactly what is expected of the faculty member, and including this next thing, which is also really important: the intellectual property that is being created by this course development process. Who owns the course? Now, typically, the idea is if a faculty member creates content for a course that they are teaching, the faculty member owns that property, unless there is a contract in place that specifies a work for hire agreement, where the faculty member provides course content in exchange for a cash payout. But in that kind of a situation, then there is still the whole academic freedom thing. And are you making me teach a canned course? Or what happens to this content that I create for this course? Can I really not use it anywhere else? So one of the ways in which intellectual property can be handled is through a shared ownership agreement or a use license agreement where, okay, you're being paid to provide the content for this course. And this content for this course may be taught by other people. However, you have a license granted to you by the university to be able to use this content for research, to be able to write on it, etc., and even to teach other courses as a, for instance, as an adjunct for another institution with this content, and we're not going to go after you. So there are ways in which you can do this. The other way, of course, would be the faculty member owns the content and in the license gives the university a license to utilize that content, have other people teach with that content and modify the content. But the idea is it is a shared agreement that satisfies the intellectual property needs and the needs of faculty to be able to work with that content after the course development. Let's see. Have you seen situations where the college says they own any content that is created, whether by faculty, IDs, etc.? Yes, yes. I have seen it both ways. It really depends on your university's intellectual property policy. And that's the thing. It needs to be written somewhere. It needs to be a written policy. My university's intellectual property policy was in place before I arrived less than 3 years ago. And it had work for hire stipulations and it had intellectual property stipulations. What belonged to the faculty, what belonged to the university. So again, those decisions need to be made before they become a problem. And that's the same thing with all of this. So if you're going to create these courses, how are you going to judge them? Is there going to be any kind of minimum standards that are required for online courses? And if so, what are those standards there? And there are a lot of these standards that are available that you can adopt. There's Quality Matters. There is the Online Learning Consortium quality scorecards, which are known as OSCAR for the course development one. There's Blackboard exemplary course standards. There's AECT standards. There's Cal State quality learning and teaching QLT standards. In my state of Illinois, we have the Illinois Online Network QOCI quality online course initiative. These things exist. So what does your institution use to determine, again, when a course is done and when it is acceptable? The other thing you can do, which we do as well, is to take and pick and choose and create your own internal standards. And it's really nice if you can get these internal standards in front of your faculty advisory boards, academic senate, etc., and have them sign off on this. Because then it becomes the university standards, not just the online learning department standards there. But you have to decide what your standards are going to be, whether they're going to be, you're going to use the Quality Matters process, or whether you're going to use the items and create your own process. And it's probably not shocking for you to hear that Quality Matters, Online Learning Consortium, Blackboard, and QLC and QOCI, the majority of those items are the same. I mean, they all say measurable learning objectives. Your learning objectives aligned with your learning outcomes aligned with your assessments. That's just good instruction and stuff. And there isn't a copyright on good instruction. So what a lot of us do is we take all of these rubrics, we eliminate the redundancies, and then we say, okay, is this a deal breaker or is this a nice to have? And the deal breakers become our standards there. I also show the AECT standards. AECT standards are a little different in that these other standards were really designed, and this is especially true with Quality Matters. It was designed for the faculty member who has created a course, who then has a group of peers evaluate that course and give you suggestions and recommendations for how to improve it. The AECT standards were really meant to be done as a course is being developed to determine things that you want in your course ahead of time rather than after the fact. So then how is this process going to happen? Is this going to be a faculty or peer review process for this? Is this going to be a course evaluation committee that looks at courses? Is this going to be an internal process? At my institution, the initial evaluation is done by instructional designers, different than the ones who are working on the course. And then the last evaluation, well, the SME does the initial one, and then a different ID, and then the academic department, the chair, etc., for evaluating the course. So we do use a 3-level. But you have to determine this. How is this going to happen? How are you going to determine, again, when the course is done, when the course is acceptable? What are you going to use and what is your process? Or is it just going to be autonomous? Under the autonomous model, there is no evaluation, or the evaluation is optional. You can do a Quality Matters review if you want to, but you don't have to. You can go ahead and teach your course just as you developed it without anybody else's input. So then when we get this the development thing, then there are some operational decisions to make. One is, how are you going to classify your course development types? And a lot of times people don't think about that until you get into the process of course development, because when you're developing a new course, you're developing a new course. But what happens a few years down the line when content is updated, when there are new laws and regulations and all that? How do you handle course redevelopment as opposed to brand new development? Particularly if a course doesn't have to be redeveloped from scratch. What about partial course developments? If you're going to use some of the existing course and then just incorporate development in the rest of the course or in parts of it, do you have the same stipend? Do you have the same situation? Is an instructional designer going to be involved? All of that sort of things. And how are you going to evaluate those? What about hybrid courses and blended courses as opposed to fully online courses? Is there going to be a similar kind of process for blended and hybrid course development? So again, these are decisions that are best made early on and put into policies and procedures and operations manuals, because you're going to have to decide this at some point. So it's a lot less headachy if you do it early on. Other things about operations is if you want to use course or curriculum mapping as you're developing the course. Now, a course map is basically a blueprint document that ties the course objectives to program level objectives. And it also ties the individual lesson objectives to the course objectives and to the assessments. And so this is how you can demonstrate your alignment. It helps in the development of courses. It keeps the faculty members and instructional designers on tasks, and accrediting bodies love it because these course maps can be used to show how your face-to-face courses are aligned with your online courses. And so, so it facilitates curriculum review and updates. So if you're going to use this, how are you going to use it? What does it look like? Um, can I contact Tony and he'll give me an example of one? Absolutely. So then the other is regarding the design of these particular courses. Is this an independent design, a templated design, or what is referred to in the literature as a master course design? An independent design basically means that the faculty member, it's like the autonomous thing. My course can look and act and navigate however I want. There isn't any kind of standard. Under a templated design, the university provides templates. Now, these could be optional, they could be mandatory. But what that does is it provides a form and structure and navigation for the courses so that they look and act more alike and make it so that the student doesn't have to completely learn a new style navigation, where things are, how to turn things in, etc., that the courses look and act more similar to each other. Now, a master course is basically a template course that has content in it. And so under a master course, or what we call at my institution, an online template course, means that a subject matter expert and instructional designer have created a course that includes content to make that course ready to teach. So if you have a brand new hire, if you have a GA teaching the course, etc., they have a course that is ready to teach. It has the content. It can be taught as is, but it doesn't have to be taught as is if you don't lock down the templates. So for instance, in Blackboard, we have these things called blueprints versus templates. For a template, you start off with something that looks like this way, but you have editor access and you can change things around. In a blueprint, they're locked down. So are you going to lock down? Are you going to provide templates? Are you even going to use master courses so that new faculty and others have a course that's ready to teach, as opposed to having to develop something new from scratch? And then,
Anthony,
yes,
sorry to interrupt. This is Greg. We have roughly about 10 minutes
okay,
available
great,
to us.
great.
So I know you
I
wanted
have
to,
I have one more slide.
great timing. Okay.
Okay, and so the other thing to look at is accessibility, and that's something that especially now with upcoming Title II regulation deadlines, um, that we need to make sure that our courses are accessible by people who are second language learners, for people with hearing impairments, with visual impairments, etc. Um, because we now have to meet WCAG 2.1 AA standards by 2026. And so ways in which you can do this are by applying principles of universal design for learning. That's an entire session all by itself. And so it's the right thing to do, but also because advocacy groups have successfully pursued legal action against higher education institutions. So and they win. So if they are going to win against Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, and Johns Hopkins, they are definitely going to win against Illinois State University. So it is the right thing to do. So in all of these, I haven't told you how to necessarily make the decisions, but these are decisions that need to be made at some point, because you can either make them now or make them under duress later. And so questions, feel free to just unmute.
Okay. Do you see any questions in chat?
Let's see. Are you willing
I,
to share the slides with participants? Absolutely. Absolutely. I what is the process for me to do that with ELCC? Do if I send it to you, can you make it available to them?
We can make it, we can definitely make it happen. We'd be more than happy if you wanted to join our Discord server too, but you might be busy. So thank you for doing this. I have a question for you, and this is so self-centered, the question I'm about to ask. When interviewing potential instructional designers and learning designers, why do you think we have a hard time getting them to express where they fit in the instructional design sphere and what kind of unit or shop they came from? Why do you think that might be?
Well, a lot is because instructional designers have been under a situation of diplomacy. How can I say diplomacy, survival by diplomacy.
Okay. Yes.
The cultures are so different from different institutions. Priority for me is to elevate the role of the instructional designer, and to elevate it so that it is equivalent to the faculty member's role when we're doing this. That is not true at a lot of institutions. At a lot of institutions, instructional designers are not allowed to have that kind of parity role. And that is particularly true in decentralized situations where instructional designers are employees of the college joint with faculty, because then there is a definite hierarchy as far as that goes. So instructional designers learn to keep their mouths shut. Unless they are empowered by people like me who says, open your mouth.
Okay, good.
Because you are the one who determines whether this course meets the standards and meets the terms of the contract. So the faculty subject matter expert has a vested interest in having a good working partnership with the instructional designer, because the instructional designer is the one who recommends the payment to the faculty member. So, a lot of that is. The other thing is I want to extend an open invitation to anybody here that if you would like to contact me and ask what choices I recommend, and if you want to see things like a sample SME contract that has this stuff in here, or a course map or stuff like that, just please feel free to reach out to me at aapiña@ilstu.edu, and I'll be happy to share or to commiserate, or I'm a good shoulder to cry on.
Thank you.
Anything else? I think we have
Well,
a
we
minute.
got about 5
Oh,
minutes
no, we have
left.
6 minutes, right?
Six, yes, six.
Oh, yeah. Keep them
So
coming then.
I don't know if there's other questions out there from our participants.
I have a question, if you can hear me okay. This is Miguel Buleje. Can you
Yes.
hear me okay? Okay. So just a general question, just to hear your perspective. In this space of curriculum development, course development, and I'm sure, I think I know the answer to the question, but I just want to hear how do you feel about it. AI, right? How do you feel about AI? Do you see a trend? Of course, there might be the case, an industry trend in favor of incorporating AI as a function of course development. Anything that you would like to share? Where do you think we're going? What are the challenges? Anything that you want to share in this space of course development and the implications for AI?
Sure. That, of course, can be a complete session all in itself. So let me try to condense it as much as I can. So the answer to your main question is yes. AI definitely has a role to play and will continue to have a role to play, because the only people I heard it said in the early stages of this, that your job is not going to be replaced by AI. Your job is going to be replaced by somebody who knows how to use AI to do your job. And so I look at AI just like I have looked at every other bit of technology. It's a set of power tools to help us do what we do better, faster, more efficiently. So with AI, if you want to have something fun, I had a colleague say, okay, have AI give me principles of instructional design formatted like the 10 Commandments. And it did it, and it did it well too. And so AI can help when you are looking at assessments of learning outcomes. That's the thing that is most difficult for our faculty members, because none of them are trained in how to assess learning outcomes. So they tend to use the kind of tests and assignments that they used before. Some of them, after much experience and much, come up with really, really great assignments and really, really great assessments. But too many are just as willing to just use the test banks that come with the textbook, which are written, by the way, by faculty who also were not trained in assessment. So the test banks that come with textbooks are usually pretty low quality. AI can help us, give us ideas, do first drafts of things that we are developing. Can AI completely replace a faculty member, or can AI completely replace a competent, experienced instructional designer? Not well. And so, but AI provides a set of power tools that can help us speed up the development, that can give us strengths in areas that we have some weaknesses, and can help us in things like personalizing instruction and other areas, and can be great for brainstorming and to see what already is out there. It's Google on steroids. And so AI definitely has a role to play, and we would do well not to ignore it, but to utilize it and really determine where its strengths and weaknesses are, because there are a lot of weaknesses with ChatGPT. There are going to be fewer in ChatGPT next year. And so
Anthony, I think this might be a good place to end the presentation, although I think Kay and I and everybody else would just love to spend the rest of the afternoon with you, but
you're very kind.
But the presentations march on. So thank you again for participating in the conference. Thanks for your presentation today, and hope that you can stick around for the rest of the day and maybe even tomorrow and attend some of our other sessions. It's been a pleasure facilitating this for you, and I am going to stop the recording.
You. And
as a good trained moderator from Kay would